Okay. I want to talk very, clearly and directly about the halachos of cooking on Yontif, and specifically, as it applies to cooking, in the kitchen, as well as cooking for washing, which is the halacha of showering, because we'll see that as well as other aspects of what we have to be careful with showering. Cooking is the main issue. So I'm just going to give a very basic, a quick overview, and it's like this. Malacha an Yantif is aser min haTorah, right? It's an isser d'oraisa to do malacha an Yantif, unless that malacha is for ochel nefesh. If that malacha is for ochel nefesh, which means for eating needs for Yantif day itself, for that day, then the malacha is mutter. If it's not for eating needs, ochel nefesh, which we'll define in a second, or if it is for ochel nefesh, but if it's not for Yantif, it's for the second day of Yantif, let's say, or if it's for Chol HaMoed, or for another time, that's an Isra D'Oraisa. We're not allowed to do malacha on Yantif. So the only heter of malacha is malacha for Yantif itself. On that day itself, which is why it's just very important this year, especially when we have a 3-day Yontif. So first of all, it's very important to remember on Erev Yontif to do Eruv Tavshilin, because that's going to allow us to go ahead and prepare on Yontif for Shabbos, which otherwise is Aser. And in addition, it's just important to remember for the second Seder night, especially this year, if people are not going to be going to shul and everyone's just going to be at home and davening, so you can't start preparations for the second Seder night until the first day of Yontif is completely over. You're not allowed to heat up food for the Seder. You're not allowed to start, getting things ready, cleaning dishes, anything like that. You're not allowed to do, and certainly not malacha until the first day of Yontif is over. And then, as if it's Motzei Yontif, like it is here in Israel on Thursday night. And then when it's, here in Yerushalayim, the time is like 7:43, I think, is Matzei Yantif. Then you can light candles and do whatever malacha you need to do, because now it's already the second day. But it's an Isser D'Oraisa to do malacha on Yantif for another day. Now, there is an exception to this, which is important to know, because it does come up, especially when it comes to the halacha of cooking, and that is if it's a situation where the cooking that you're doing, you're not doing any more acts of malacha. Okay, listen carefully. You're not doing more acts of malacha as a result of the extra cooking. For example, let's say you're making a tomato soup, okay? Or a chicken soup, let's say, but I'm just trying to think of something that doesn't require a malacha to get it ready, other than the cooking. For example, like potatoes might be peeling more potatoes than you need. So let's talk about something that's very clear. Or you're baking a cake and you only need for Yontif half a cake. Okay, so in a situation like that, where it's just going to be one act of putting the pot onto the stove, or one act of putting that cake into the oven, and you're not allowed to say it out loud. You're not allowed to say beferush that you're adding more for extra Yontif. In a situation like that, then it's mutter. That's called ribui b'shiurim. Okay, so I just want to make that point clear. But it does not apply to anything that is individualized. Like if you're frying schnitzel, you may not fry extra schnitzel than what you need for Yontif. Because you're going to be having a meal during Chol HaMoed, and now you're frying. You're not allowed to do that, because every act of frying is an act of a malacha. You're allowed to make as much as you think you may need, and to make sure you have enough. That's for sure. And if you have leftovers, you're allowed to eat it. That's for sure, right? But I'm talking about like bikavana, making more than what you need on Yantif is aser, again, unless it's that situation, like you're making one big pot of soup, or one one big loaf of one big cake, or something like that. Or one big chicken, even though you only need a small part of the chicken, right? That would even be mutter also. Let's say you only really need, let's say it's just you and your husband that are home for Yontif, and you really only need for Yontif, just the leg and a thigh, and that's enough that you need for the whole seuda. You're allowed to cook a whole chicken, right? Because there's no malacha involved in getting the chicken ready and putting on the seasoning and whatever else you're going to do, right? You wouldn't be able to peel more potatoes if you want to put potatoes in there. You wouldn't be able to peel more potatoes than what you needed for Yontif, because peeling potatoes is a malacha, right? But let's say whatever you put in there, you're allowed to cook now that whole chicken. Again, you're not allowed to say that it's for after Yontif, but since it's only one act of cooking, it's one maisa, and it's all together in the same thing, so that's mutter to do. Okay. Now, how this applies halacha l'maisa as far as cooking on yontif and what, when, and under what circumstances. So, anything that needs to be heated up, for example, something that was cold and it's, you need to warm it up. So, whereas on Shabbos we're not allowed to warm up liquids, that does not apply at all. On yontif you can warm up liquids, whereas on Shabbos we have to warm it up with like it has to be a kedera al gabe kedera, it has to be with a shinui, or it has to be that it was on the fire from before Shabbos. All of those halachos do not apply on Yontif. Meaning on Yontif, you're not allowed to light a fire, right? That's not a malacha that we're allowed to do. You're allowed to extend the fire from somewhere else. That's why it's a very good idea that if you have a gas stove, it's a very good idea if you don't want to leave it on, but it's a good idea that you leave a candle, a yahrzeit candle or something going. That way, if you feel like you need to light it, you're allowed to take a match from a yahrzeit candle and bring it over to the gas stove. If you've got one of those gas stoves that clicks, so try your best to, ours does that. It doesn't click at the end, it clicks right at the beginning. So try your best to do that as fast as you can. And if it clicks once or twice, that's, you did your best. But you're allowed to go right past that as fast as you can. And then, light the fire with the match. You're not allowed to blow out the match or shake the match. So you have to make sure that in advance, you know where you're going to be putting that match down, somewhere that's going to be safe. That's not going to obviously cause a fire or do something like that. Okay, so again, if you've got a fire on, you're allowed to put a pot of soup directly on that fire. You're allowed to, put a pan and put oil in that pan and fry eggs, if you could find them over here in Israel. I don't know. Okay, Baruch Hashem, now they have more. You're allowed to do anything like that on Yontif, again, provided that you're doing it for Yontif day, and provided that you are not lighting a new fire. Now, what about adjusting the fire once you're cooking? So the halacha is as follows. Any changing of the fire up or down that is needed for the cooking process is mutter. Okay? Again, any raising or lowering of the fire that you need to do in order to cook this properly, that's going to be mutter to do, right? But let's say when you're finished cooking and you want to turn off the fire because you want to just finish and you want to save the gas, so that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to that after the pan is taken off and you've served it and now you want to turn off that fire, that you're not allowed to do. What you can do is you could leave the pan on the fire until it's finished cooking, but you want to keep it warm and you don't want it to burn, so you're allowed at that point to turn the fire down while the food is on it. This is a big machlokas. I'm not going to get into it now. I really want to be very quick. And halacha l'maisa, there are some poskim, I'll mention, there are some poskim who say that it's better to light another small fire rather than lower this fire. And there are people who do that, which is fine. But halacha l'maisa, Rav Moshe Feinstein held this way, and many others. Rosh Zalman here was machmir on this thing, but Rav Moshe held this way, and this is what we do at home. That you're allowed to lower the fire if it's for cooking purposes. Again, so if you've got something on the fire and you want that it's not going to burn, but you want to keep it on the fire to keep it warm, so you can't turn the fire off, right? But you're allowed to turn the fire low so that it'll keep the food, warm and it won't burn it. And then your fire is low, and then you're allowed to take off the food. If you have a fire that you really, really, don't want to have going, or if it's dangerous to have it going, so the Shulchan Aruch writes what you're allowed to do. You're allowed to let a pot of water boil over, and in a grama fashion, you're allowed to put out the fire. And then turn off the gas if you have that situation. Okay, so if that comes up, you're allowed to do that. If you've got an electric stove, a burner, so then this really doesn't apply to you. If you're going to be leaving it on from before Yontif, you have to leave it on. You're not really supposed to change it on Yontif. There's some poskim who say once it's red, you can make it higher and lower. I don't know. If you need to be in touch with me specifically, so then don't ask me in this year, and you could text me and we'll be in touch about it. But when it comes to a fire, that's the halacha. And again, you can't light it. You have to light it from a yahrzeit candle or from another fire. But once it's lit, you're allowed to raise it and lower it as you need for the cooking that you are doing. And likewise, if you need to light another fire, to have two burners going, but then again, you're going to have those two burners going and you're not allowed to put them out. You have to just be careful about that. A lot of people use a blech on Yontif, but that's not for halachic reasons, that's just for convenience reasons. They want to have fewer fires going and be able to heat up more pots. So a blech is a convenient way of doing that, right? If you put one flame going and you have a blech going, so then you have more, but that's not a halachic thing. Whereas on Shabbos we use a blech for halachic purposes. On Yontif, It's for convenience purposes. That's just important to make that distinction. Okay, so that's as far as cooking is concerned. I just want to discuss as far as Eruv Tavshilin and cooking on Erev Shabbos is concerned. So again, normally, again, this is for those people who are keeping 2 days of Yom Tov. For us here in Eretz Yisrael, so Yom Tov is Thursday night. It finishes at 7:43. We make Havdalah. And then, with not a fire, just a Havdalah on a coast, no besamim or a fire. And then Friday is, Chol HaMoed for us, and the day Yom Hanef, it's the day of the Tnufas HaOmer. It was a big day in the olden days, and then that night is obviously Shabbos for us. But in Chutz La'aretz, and for people who are keeping 2 days of Yom Tov here, so you have 2 days of Yom Tov, and that means that you have to get ready for Shabbos on Friday, which is still Yom Tov. So just like we said in the beginning, that preparing on Yom Tov for anything after Yom Tov is aser, mamish aser min haTorah. It's doing malacha. So the Gemara has a whole sugya about this, which again I'm not going to get into now. Fascinating and very very geshmak sugya. But the whole idea of Eruv Tavshilin and why it works. But the concept is as follows: that even though under normal circumstances we're not allowed to do anything for Yom Tov on Yom Tov for Shabbos, and we're on Friday we wouldn't be allowed to prepare for Yom Tov for Shabbos on Yom Tov. I keep saying it wrong. Right? Eruv Tavshilin is a mechanism by which Chazal created that we are as if we're beginning our Shabbos preparations. We're beginning already Erev Yom Tov. We've already begun our Shabbos preparations, and now what we're doing on Yom Tov is really a continuation of what we started earlier. Again, why this works and how this works is a whole big sugya which we're not going to get into. However, through this mechanism, which is a mitzvah, I'm saying they made it a mitzvah to do this. We make a bracha on this, it's a kiyum mitzvah. So through that, and you have to do with one baked item and one cooked item. Just look in the Art Scroll Siddur and just follow the instructions over there and read it. What it says, you should read it in English. But through that mechanism, that allows us again on Friday to cook for Shabbos. So for those of you who are keeping 2 days of Yom Tov and you made an Eruv Tavshilin, so none of those halachos that we said earlier apply. On Friday, you're allowed to cook for Shabbos explicitly. You're allowed to fry schnitzel explicitly for Shabbos, and you're allowed to say, I'm doing this for Shabbos. Obviously, you can't do any malacha that you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov. You're only allowed to do the bishul that you could do on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to light fires or anything like that. But whatever you could do on Yom Tov, you're allowed to do for Shabbos if you made an Eruv Tavshilin from before. Okay, it happens to be this year. If you forget to make an Eruv Tavshilin, you can make an Eruv Tavshilin on Thursday. I'll just say this, put this in parentheses, just in case anybody ends up needing this. And so the halacha is, when you have a 2-day Yom Tov like this going into Shabbos, on Thursday, you could say the following. Okay, follow this. If you follow, great. If not, then just put this in parentheses, we'll go on. But it's like this. Really, every day is a suffix, right? Thursday is a suffix. Maybe Thursday is really Erev Yom Tov and Friday is Yom Tov, or maybe Friday is Yom Tov and Thursday is Erev Yom Tov, right? Or I'm sorry, maybe Thursday is Yom Tov and Friday is right, exactly, Erev Shabbos. So the Rabbi Akiva Eiger writes like this: so on Thursday, okay, it's Yom Tov, it's already Yom Tov, right? But on Thursday, I'm allowed to take a matzah and a piece of fish, right? I'm allowed to do, and I'm allowed to say the following. I'm allowed to say, if today is Erev Yom Tov, right? Meaning, if tomorrow, Friday, is really Yom Tov, then this should count as an Eruv, right? This should be my Eruv Tavshilin, and this should allow me to cook tomorrow on Friday for Shabbos, right? Because on Thursday, it's Erev Yom Tov. Now, I'm keeping Yom Tov because we don't know that, right? But if Friday is really Yom Tov, then this is a good Eruv Tavshilin. Okay, and if today, Thursday, is really Yom Tov and tomorrow is really Erev Shabbos, so then I don't need this Erev Tavshilin, right? In other words, we all know that really one of the days halachically is Yom Tov. Now, even though we treat both days as Yom Tov, we're allowed to treat the 2 days as a suffix. So in this case, Rabbi Akiva Eiger writes, it's just an interesting thing that happens right now when you have a 3-day Yom Tov like this, that you're allowed on Thursday to make an Eruv Tavshilin al Tanai. So if you forget to make an Eruv Tavshilin and you realize on Thursday, don't despair, but you can then take a matzah and a piece of fish and make it al Tanai. I don't know if you make a bracha or not. Unfortunately, I don't remember. I don't see why not. I think you should make a bracha. I don't see why not. Yes, I think you should make a bracha. There's no reason not to, as far as I can understand. So if it happens to you, you can do it with a bracha, and that's the halacha. So you made your Eruv Tavshilin on Thursday, and either way you're covered, because if Friday is Yom Tov, you're covered, and if Thursday is Yom Tov, you're covered, because Friday anyway is Yom Tov. Okay, close parentheses. If you didn't get that, then don't worry about it. But that's the halacha of cooking, cooking for Yom Tov on Yom Tov, cooking for Yom Tov on Shabbos. Can somebody just mute their mic? It sounds like there's some noise in the background if somebody's mic is on. That's cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos, with an Eruv Tavshilin, we're able to do that under those circumstances. Okay, now another area where cooking comes up and is, very important is the area of washing, right? Because the way that we get hot water is by cooking it, right? In the olden days, that used to happen by, they had to make a pot and put water into it and put it onto a fire and cook it, and then they would mix that water with cold water until they got water that they washed with, right? Nowadays, the way that we do it is we open up a faucet and we've got a water boiler either with gas and fire or electricity, or in Israel with the sun or whatever it is, and that water comes out hot and that lets cold water in. And that cold water gets cooked, so it's the same thing. It's, even though we're not actually using the water we're cooking for our washing, right, which is something interesting, you could hear that, and the poskim who talk all about this and why it's mutter, right, because, right, I'm cooking up there on my roof and I'm using this water here. I'm not really washing with the water that I'm cooking, right? However, since I can't wash without hot water, without cooking that water, it's mutter. Even though there's what to be said there. Okay, so that's the thing. So turning on your hot water faucet, the reason it's usher on Shabbos is because it's cooking. I'm cooking cold water in order to get my hot water out from the faucet. So on Yom Tov, anytime you're turning on the hot water, it has to be that it's a situation that you're allowed to cook for. Right, so obviously, if you want hot water to drink hot water, that's going to be mutter, right? But what about for washing? So the Gemara says that washing a person's panav, yodav, veraglov, right, which basically means like washing your face, washing your hands, washing individual parts of the body that get dirty. That's mutter, and that there's no question about, because even though that's not eating, but that's also called ochel nefesh. That's also called the things that a person needs to live. On Yom Tov, which is what's included in this idea of ochel nefesh, not just actual food. And since this is something that's called shavel, achol nefesh, washing your hands and your face in hot water, that's something that like every normal person does. So that is included in the heter of ochel nefesh on Yom Tov. Okay, so that's number one. So turning on hot water for no reason at all, or just because you want to watch something melt or who knows what, so you can't do that, right? You're cooking water on Yom Tov. You have to be cooking water with a purpose on Yom Tov. I'm still trying to be makbid on Yom Tov to keep the water on cold, because if I'm just rinsing something off or washing something off, there's really no reason for the hot water to be on. You know what I'm saying? Because even though, again, the hot water is mutter, but it's mutter when I need it. If I'm not really using it, so I should try not to be cooking. I don't make a big deal about this in my home and tell everybody, but I just, whenever I'm at the faucet, I always, put it to the right, and whenever I see it, I put it to the right, to keep it on the cold. Okay, however, if I'm washing my hands or washing dishes is also included in this in terms of ochel nefesh, or I wake up in the morning and I want to wash my face in the morning with warm water. So under any of those cases, I'm allowed to turn on the hot water, because that's a case of cooking for Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, for something that's ochel nefesh and shavel ochel nefesh. Okay, so now the question that this extends to obviously is the question of showering. And this, we all know, is a big question, a controversy, and I even have a video of it from a number of years ago before I became close with Rav Asher Weiss, and I should really take the video down because I don't say the same thing anymore, right? But the question has been always through all the years: is showering considered shavel chol nefesh or not? Right? In other words, in the times of the Gemara, it's very clear. In the times of the Gemara, washing a person's whole body in hot water was not considered shavel chol nefesh. That wasn't considered to be something that everybody did and everybody needed. And that's why the Gemara is explicit that you're only allowed to cook on Yom Tov for panav yadav v'raglav, right? Just the face and the hands, etc. But washing rechitzas kol gufo b'chamin, there's a title, rechitzas kol gufo b'chamin, washing a whole body in hot water on Yom Tov is Aser, as far as the Gemara is concerned, and the Shulchan Aruch, etc. And many of the poskim talk about it. Now, in the more modern times and more recent times, it's been discussed a lot more extensively if this has changed. And already Rav Chaim Pinchas Steinberg, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, and others, and Rav Asher Weiss, I believe, holds this way. But I already have switched over to this in the past number of years and telling people that halacha l'maisa it's mutter. Halacha l'maisa nowadays we consider showering rachitzas kol gufo is considered to be shavel chol nefesh, even in Israel and America. That's totally normal. It's something that everybody does. It's not just for special people or mifunakim. On the contrary, people who really don't wash every day are considered to be the people who are less hygienic, especially nowadays. So halacha l'maisa, what that means is that as opposed to what I've even taught in the past and said in the past, and what maybe you've heard in the past, and what other poskim say, that you have to wash only a part of your body at a time, and some of your body has to be out of the shower, and that I don't paskin like that anymore. If a person wants to shower and put their entire body in the shower like a regular shower on Yom Tov, it is permissible to do so, and it is permissible to do so with hot water, whatever temperature water that you are comfortable with. Okay, so that's number one. That's as far as bishul is concerned. As far as cooking is concerned, so cooking for rachitzas kol gufo is mutter halach l'maisa. That's what we're saying. However, there's still a few other malachos that do not get suspended for ochel nefesh. Right, ochel nefesh only applies to those malachos that are like in the sidura de pas, that are part of the making of bread and then food, and parts. Not even that's even wrong. What I just said is wrong. I take that back. I got confused. Strike that from the record. Nothing to do with sidura de pas. That includes planting and harvesting, which is not mutar on Yom Tov. It's only things that are necessary for the immediate preparation of food. Things that are done for long term, and things that are done on on large scales and things like that. And malachas that have nothing to do with food. So let's say memareach, right, which in the Mishkan that was smoothing out the animal hides, which for us is putting on creams or smoothing anything out. So that's asur on Yom Tov, just like it is on Shabbos, and that's asur even for ochel nefesh. So that means you're not allowed to use bar soap. Right, a bar of soap on Shabbos is a problem of mimareach, because when we scrub the soap either on our body or on a sponge or washcloth, we're smoothing out the soap with every layer, and the poskim say we're not allowed to do that on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So that's number one. You can't use a solid soap. However, liquid soap is already of a consistency that mimareach doesn't apply. Most poskim today say this, that liquid soap and body gels, and this applies to alcohol gel also, which is kosher Pesach. You don't have to worry. Just as a side point, alcohol gel is mutter on Pesach. I was asked Vice about it last year already in my car. I had it and I drove. Just a few days before Pesach. But anything like that, there's no isser of mimareach. So that's number one. You can't use bar soap. You have to use some sort of liquid soap. Now, number two is when it comes to hair. Okay, there's an isser of sechita, an isser of squeezing, and even though some aspects of sechita are mutar on Yom Tov, but sechita seyar, squeezing water out of hair, which is nisr midrabanan, does not get suspended on Yom Tov. It's not connected to food, not connected to preparation of food, and therefore all the halachos, again, all those halachos that apply to hair and squeezing water out of hair and liquid in hair, all of those things apply on Yom Tov just the same as Shabbos. So what that means is that a person is allowed to go in the water and let the water run on their hair and then on their head. For me, it's not such a big problem, but especially for women with a lot more hair, you're really not supposed to put your hands in your hair and go like this, because in doing that you're like squeezing water in and out of the hair. And obviously also shampoo you're not supposed to do that way. What you could do is you could squeeze shampoo on the top of your head and then put that into the water and go back and forth and let it go into your hair and then let it go under the water and rinse it out. But you should not be helping it with your hands. You should not be going in there and helping your hair, whatever you do, and squeezing the liquid in and out. So this is not obviously the most convenient way to shower, especially if you have a lot of hair. But okay, that's the halachos of Yom Tov. So that's the other thing, a person that you have to be careful when it comes to showering is in terms of hair. It applies to men also, applies to beards and to hair anywhere, that you have to be careful not to squeezing in the hair and the liquid in and out of the hair. And then finally, the same thing applies when drying. Whereas normally people will women anyway, squeeze water out of their hair or do things like that. So on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do that. You could wrap your hair in a towel, and you could wrap it in such a way that it soaks up the hair. And you can even press the towel against your hair, but you can't squeeze it so that there's water that drips out. If the water just gets absorbed into the towel, that's okay. You're allowed to to that level of padding it or squeezing it so that it's only going to be absorbed in the towel is okay. But you're not allowed to squeeze it in any way if there's going to be any water that's going to end up actually dripping out of the hair and existing separate from the hair. Okay, so that's, again, just to repeat, as far as showering, as far as setting the water temperature and using hot water. So again, on Shabbos, you may not do that, but on Yom Tov, you may shower in whatever temperature water you are comfortable, and that includes your whole body, and showering at once like you would regularly during the week. The only things that we have to watch out for, again, is using a liquid soap and not using a bar soap, and two, the issue of schita, the issue of squeezing when it comes to dealing with the hair, both in terms of washing before and in terms of drying afterwards. Okay, but I think that basically covers it as a, on the whole, as far as Bishul is concerned. So I'm going to stop the YouTube here, and then if there's any questions from the Zoom here, I'll take some questions now.